and welcome to another episode of Speculative Speculations. I'm Varsha.
Jared.
I'm Chris.
And I'm Dan.
And I am Steve.
And this is a series where we talk about speculative stories in all their forms. Today we're going to be finishing up Children of Memory by Adrian Tchaikovsky. I forget how far we read last time, but the last approximately 100 pages or so. It might be a little over 100, maybe 120 pages, the last few sections of the book. We will be talking about that. The short story for today, as we work our way through the big book of science fiction, is Grandpa by James Schmitz. I think I have the author's name correct. I forgot to look up the short story for next week. Oh, I know. It's the Game of Cat and Dragon by Cordwainer Smith. I've been looking forward to that one because I'd really like to know what Steve thinks of it. I'm sure he's going to hate it, but I want to know how he hates it.
That's what I've become now. Okay.
No, it's just a really silly story. And I know there are certain kinds of silliness you just do not like. I think it's in that category. So, so since we're finishing up Children of Memory, we are going to start another book next week. It will be Windup Girl by Paolo Bacigalupi. I don't know.
Wow.
Dan can help me with the pronunciation. I think I don't know. No,
I didn't check what the actual name is, but sounds
Okay.
good.
Okay. And we will be reading up to chapter 6, which brings us to a little over 100 pages in the UK edition of the book and about 77 in the US edition. With that, we can start talking about Children of Memory, what we thought about it, and how many friends I'm losing today because they did not like the book.
Well, we can still be friends, Varsha, because I liked it a lot.
Nice.
Yeah. I actually liked the ending quite a lot more than I think everything else in the book. Actually.
That's a good way to describe it.
Yeah. The middle just lost me after a while, but the last maybe, I don't know, 2 sections were pretty interesting.
So the parts after Miranda comes back and a bit of whole
kind
history.
of. Yeah. I feel it was getting a bit confused. Like at some point, we were just like, okay, we know there's something going wrong with Miranda and Liv and the story because the story made no sense. And I don't think I needed another like 50 or 60 pages of a story not making sense.
I see what you mean.
Because I couldn't really follow anything that was happening. You know what I mean?
Did you feel like it built a sense of chaos to then later really hammer home the simulation aspects of the story? Like the fact that Liv now and Liv now are all the same time because it's all the simulation and it is literally now. It's not any sort of mistake or anything. So all the blending together and sort of the simulation computer or machine or whatever having a sad day, I think is anyway. Yeah, I was wondering if you thought that the chaos helped or did it just detract? I feel like it made that reveal far more effective for that reason. But yeah.
No, I think you're right. I just didn't need as much of it because I got the idea, you know. And we had got to know the characters pretty well by halfway through the book. And the next part didn't really characterize them additionally, I felt. Like we already had their personality and everything. It just added more different versions of the same story with slight variations. And I think if you just did a 1 or 1.5 or whatever, like bit of different things, it's enough for us to say, well, there's something not right here that makes no sense. Because if you do like it this way, it makes sense if there's specific events that after the reveal you can pinpoint to things that happened. To like, oh, this event that happened, I didn't make sense at the time, but now it makes sense. But if all the events all the differences are explained by the one single thing, you don't need all those examples.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, that makes sense.
Which I don't know. What did you guys think about that whole like middle section before the reveal?
Sort of.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say it's sort of because we obviously did a lot of speculating over the past couple of weeks, and it is a book that you could speculate a lot about. And I sort of feel for a change that everybody was sort of right, if that makes sense. Like everybody had a little bit of it.
Yeah.
It's sort of correct, and it still all kind of works. So
Yeah.
I'm sort of listening to you, Dan. There, going. I mean, you're right insofar as there was no payoff for it. It was not a reveal that had a thing of, like you say, everything made sense along the way, but it was definitely one of those things where you could have a very good stab at what was happening the whole way through, and for it to at least make sense. And I was approaching it from the make sense point of view without it necessarily being satisfying in the same way that you were talking about, because it definitely didn't do that. You're right.
I did enjoy the reveal though. Like it was like the whole section of end was pretty fun, and all the consequences, and especially that last, because there was the first reveal and then like the consequences of that, which was very interesting. And the final solution, I did not think about, like the fact that we're going to bring back at least one of them and then see how to go on from there. I didn't think they would like argue that like, oh well, the simulation are real people, so we should try and make them even more real, I guess.
Yeah,
It was interesting.
that brings up some interesting questions about we are always questioning AI and stuff like that, and so it brings up an interesting question of what is real, and what is real consciousness, and what is real if something thinks it's sentient, then is it? And so it brings up a whole bunch of stuff like that. I quite enjoyed that, actually. I thought it was fun, and the reveal of there actually never was a colony at all was quite like, wow, like nothing. Like I thought there would have been like something and it died out right away or something like that, but the fact that I think she said the shuttle just crashed on the planet, and that was it.
I think when she said
great.
When we got the reveal that when Miranda got there and then she got absorbed into the machine, pretty much. At that point, I was like, well, then it means everything else also is not real, right? Because otherwise it would have made no sense. But yeah, it was a pretty fun reveal, I think.
Yeah, it was cool. I liked it.
What do you think, Steve?
Yeah, and I didn't mind the any of the build up. I thought he was making like really cool. I thought he had a lot of great ideas in this book. I thought more so than the second book, and I thought some of the ideas were pretty fascinating, because he was really playing with mythology a lot, because like you have the mythology of the town and of the colony, and that mythology had a bunch of different stories that related to its origins and histories, and that kind of goes hand in hand with actual mythologies. If you look up actual mythologies for the either Olympians or the Norse gods, Aesir and the Vanna and stuff like that, there's a lot of contradictory information sometimes in those mythologies that don't always line up perfectly, and I thought he was kind of playing with that for a while, and I liked how he did that. And he sometimes incorporated the wolf, and sometimes it wasn't, and how the Corvids started messing with that mythology and making more stories and making it a different story, and I just thought it was really neat how he did that. I thought it was this was like the more clever of the three books, as far as just storytelling goes. Maybe the first book was more inventive, but I think this has some really clever stuff thrown in there.
Yeah, I agree, and I love the sort of levels of endings we got. I'm thinking of different parts of the story as endings, even though it wasn't really. I think there were about 50 pages left when Miranda was extracted out by Gun, and then she was told what happened and that she was stuck in a simulation. I think that was a good point. And then when she was told that everybody starved and died, that was another good reveal, I think. And then from there on to find out they never existed in the first place, that really broke my heart. But also, I think the build up there I thought was fantastic too, those levels of revelation that nothing ever did exist. And then all the conversation that created, or discussion that created around the nature of consciousness. We'll have to talk about Gothi and Getley and their assessment that nobody's conscious, but or sentient, sorry, not conscious. But yeah, and the fact that the simulation could be so real, and the questions that raises. I think several books that I've read recently address this aspect. Like, just because it's a simulation doesn't make what you experience any less real, or at least that's the stance that the authors take in several of these books that I've read. And well, yeah, I think it just brought it all home, and it did it masterfully for me. And Chris, you mentioned our predictions that we talked about last week, like based on all the confusion that was going on in the middle. I know Steve and Dan, you weren't there last week, but we had predictions, and I think mine was that the planet is sentient. Jared's was that Miranda sort of like just spread all over the place as the creature from, oh, I forget, Damascus. Nod. And Chris's was that they're stuck in a time loop.
In the time bubble, yeah.
Yeah. And somehow all three things were true. The answer was all of them put together, which was fantastic. That was so rewarding to come to that after having speculated on that last week. So I loved this book. I think this might have been my favorite of the three. It is a toss-up between the first and the third, but I think I like this one just a little bit more because there are characters I love in this book, and that might just tip the scales for me.
Mm-hmm.
It does raise the question: are we living in a simulation? There's not a 0% chance. Like,
yeah, I mean, the whole series could be a simulation technically from any point, I guess. But also, right. I think that the point that we're trying to make, well, the author is trying to make, is that like if a perception is indistinguishable from the reality, does it matter? Does it even matter? Right?
Yeah.
It's sort of a similar argument to like the opposite of, if the tree falls, does it make any noise if there's no one to listen? It's like the opposite of that, but it's like the same reasoning. Like if it looks like it, does it matter if it is or if it's not? If everything you perceive from it identically mimics it? It's a good question.
Not everybody wants to unplug from the Matrix.
Yeah.
Mostly nobody does.
Well, this is exactly the point. So it kind of raised a lot of very interesting questions for me, which is the fact that I was sort of battling against the crows in this idea of sentience and saying, well, no, I have free will. I can do whatever I want. But then I was thinking, like, what have I exactly done in my life that is outside the norm? Like, if somebody was to say, pluck me out of the crowd and say, like, what is free will done for you? And it's a lot of minor. It's like what he ordered of Amazon yesterday. It's not like big stuff.
You started a booktube channel and you don't do a book haul video.
That's right, yeah. That's the kind of anarchy that I'm pushing, right? But I don't think that's
so rebellious.
Yeah, I know. I'm not sure that exactly qualifies me as being a difference in the world.
But I mean, does free will exist if you don't know the darkness that come before?
Yeah.
we've discussed this a lot in different series, but yeah, it's like, does free will even exist?
This is like
Yes.
BookTube's Inception.
That's
isn't it?
well, that's a 1,000-year-old argument for
Exactly.
philosophers that hasn't been solved yet. But
Yeah.
Let's solve it today.
But the
Let's
Corvid's
fix-
argument, is that it doesn't, because what they do is they don't have free will. They argue that they do not have free will because
Yeah.
everything is
Wait.
based on extremely complicated instincts, right? And mimicking.
They're talking about sentience, though. Are we equating sentience to free will?
I guess what's your definition of sentience, I guess?
I mean, I would think self-awareness is part of it. I don't know that it requires free will. I don't think
Okay.
sentience requires free will.
Yeah, you could
I
go
guess
for
then
Rene Descartes.
a lot of animals are sentient then.
I
I
suppose,
guess, yeah.
yeah. I suppose free will requires sentience, but is the other way around true?
Yeah, Rene Descartes says cognito ergo sum, which is I think therefore I am. That was his definition of it. So if you can
But what's
think
the definition of
and
thinking?
reason. Well, I mean, some people might be
Right.
listening to this podcast and asking themselves exactly that same question of the five of us. But
Yeah.
What
Legitimate
are
what am
question.
I listening to at this stage? But I think it is the idea that you can have different opinions in kind of different directions. Like it is a very untangible thing. Or intangible.
it's,
is that the word?
he brings up a lot of these questions in this book to gear it back to this particular story. There is a lot of questions like that in here, probably questions we couldn't answer in a 40-minute podcast, but
Yeah.
but
We're gonna try.
but I like how he did it. I like how he did it through the advent of an AI, with Kern, and through a simulation of a machine on a world, and through these two creatures that argue whether they're sentient or not. And I think through these unconventional means, he's asking all these human questions about existence, and I really thought that was quite clever on his part.
Yeah. But I think
Yep.
ultimately sentience doesn't, like, the first thing you would need to do is define what you mean, right? But it doesn't really matter if things are sentient or not based on whatever your definition is until you get to the point at the end of a book in which you have to give or assign rights to different levels of sentience. And at that point, you need a definition and you need to argue one way or the other, right?
Yeah, I mean, he puts out an argument of sorts when
Mhm.
Miranda does. Miranda puts out an argument because she's basically fighting to say that Lef has a life,
Yeah.
even though it was a simulation, and so that leads you to ask, what is the definition of having a life? Is it
Yeah.
just being biologically alive, or is it more than that? Does it go? Can you create life through a machine?
Yeah.
Is that considered sentience? Is that sentience through a machine considered to have free will? That's deep.
Yeah. And I think, isn't he sort of, I'm trying to remember if this was quite the case, wasn't he sort of arguing against assigning rights to different levels of sentience? I feel like that's kind of what he did with the flip that he did with Gothi and Getley, where throughout the book they keep arguing that they're not sentient, and it turns out that they think nobody is, that they interact with by whatever definitions they have. So they are saying, so what we read throughout and what I think the characters interacting with them throughout thought that they were somehow, if not
Mhm.
lesser, different, that their form of thinking and sentience was different. from that of the humans and the Portiides or Portiides, whatever, how you say that.
Portids?
Portids. Okay.
I don't know.
And yeah, so throughout we kept thinking, or I did at least, that they are thinking of themselves as different or somehow not maybe lesser even in their form of sentience, but he completely flipped it around and said, no, you're all the same from their perspective. And isn't he in some way then saying it's kind of foolish to make these levels in the first place and give and assign differences, or say some people are smarter, or some creatures are smarter or deserve more because they are more sentient than others, or something like that. And trying to explain myself, like there was a similar conversation in Martian Science. I think I may have mentioned it before, in which there's a conversation between an android and a human, and they have a discussion about whether the androids should have similar rights to humans. And she says, if I pass the Turing test and if I can pass for human, why should I be treated any lesser? Like, it's irrelevant whether or not I am of the same class as you, but if I behave or if I can do all the things that you can, why shouldn't I be treated with equality? Which resonates with me quite a bit, and I see a bit of that in this book.
But you're still making classes, like you're just widening the class of people within the thing, or because you're still going to have the ants still don't have the same rights as people.
Yeah, that's true.
So there's still at some point in which you go from not sentient or not having the rights of a person, and then you have the rights of a person. So you still need to find where that is, I guess.
That's true. Yeah. I guess there are creatures that you put to use because you think that you have power, because you have power over them, not just you think. And how you are using that power is, making them work for you.
I think it's more saying like you can have different types of intelligence and sentience or whatever, and they're all valuable even though they're different.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Different, not lesser, I guess is the point, right?
Yes.
Yeah. I like that.
I think it's also a kind of poke at what is sort of the basis for a lot of popular science fiction kind of tropes, which is this idea that humanity is special for some reason. If we were to ever populate the Earth, that actually humanity is like the savior, it's the center of the Federation, it's the organized, all of that kind of stuff, and I think he's sort of poking fun at that, is to say actually humanity's not all that special. Even imagine within an ecosystem that can exist, or life can exist outside of this planet, so to speak. Quite possibly, what is sentience? What is
everything that happened always have origin from humans in these books, though. There's nothing they would have had, apart from these aliens, which we don't technically know anything about. But everything else all had origin from humans, though. Even Nod would never have made that leap without the human through the humans and the humans through the cephalopods, I guess.
But on the other hand, we see a complex simulator machine left behind by some potentially dead civilization, or a civilization that's still active. And do I remember correctly that towards the end of the book, they find more of such simulating machines seeded through the galaxy? Or did I make that up and have a dream about it?
Did
I?
Cool dream.
It doesn't necessarily strike me. But to that point, Farsha, it is the idea that this sentience versus technological, because the nanovirus being a biological technology, the simulation being a generative technology of some sort, is kind of mimicking or kind of doing the sentience thing for people, if you know what I mean. It's not necessarily an existence question or a philosophical question. It's more an access to whatever it is that you're introducing into that ecosystem. And I think it's kind of go back the whole way to start up what Jared said. That's what makes this book so good, I think, is that it is full of like big scientific ideas, and it has things that you can discuss in it. It's the reason why I think this book stands well above the second book, certainly, and more in par with the first one, but it dealt very much just with a kind of more, I would say, more closed ecosystem of just like biological improvement and evolution, whereas this kind of one touches on a lot of different touch points by the end, certainly.
Yeah.
So is this all just a simulation? The entire series?
Possibly.
Series.
Yeah, it's a simulation within a Varna Kern's whatever satellite thing, or I don't know, something like that. It could be.
Yes.
But I think the point is that it doesn't matter, right? Even if it is.
Yeah.
I think that's what we're trying to say.
Yeah, it's in the context that the simulation was on the world and was the colony. But what I like about the some of this too is he's really telling us about the power of stories and the power of storytelling, and how just that whoever set up that machine with the capability of simulating the story of these people on this planet, on this colony, that was powerful enough to draw in the nod, the nod sentience, and create even more out of it. And the power of story is what did that. And I think that's really part of his message, that can lead to greater interventions, greater interactions, and greater understandings between different types of cultures and peoples and stuff like that. And I think that's a really important point that he's a theme that he's bringing across in this book, and that of course the importance of studying that kind of thing that story can lead to, and that kind of imagination and innovation, and the power of what fantasy can do. I think that's it's a really great message that he puts forth in this book. I think it's pretty powerful. More so, I think the first book was great, just for the ideas that he set up, and the his vision of what evolution could be in a different kind of aspect, and the scientific ideas were great. And I think the second book, like we said before, he kind of just repeated himself a little bit. I think with this book he went a little deeper, and he really brought forth some themes he was trying to get out and say, and I think he did it really well. I think really imaginative.
Mm-hmm.
And I think by the end of the book, he has created this idea of assimilation, of all of these different things, because obviously every book has introduced a new sort of life form that is now being taken on forward, and actually how they've used the nod as a way to give life to live, and let her exist outside of the simulation, and for that they basically be seen as an improvement for their new civilization of whatever this is. And it's sort of, maybe cynically, it just gives him an infinite amount of books that he can add to the series, and that he can keep on writing about and sort of still keep it fresh in some ways.
Yeah. I mean,
Yes.
I have a question. Do you think this book benefits from being part of a series, or because it's very different from the previous two? Could it have been a standalone book, or is there a benefit for it being after the first two?
Good question.
You definitely need the context of the first book, at least.
Mm-hmm.
I think the big questions around consciousness, he could probably have potentially set those up in this book, but the stuff around Kern and what Miranda, how she becomes a simulating machine herself, like she has this thought towards the end where there is a flip of she was copying other people, like other people are running her versus she's now running other people. Thinking of people as processes, and yeah, so there's that and the stuff with Khan. and the questions that raises around the nature of consciousness and sentience, I think, are the more powerful for the context that we got from the first two books. But that's, I agree that stuff could have been potentially set up in this book, but um, the build up there, I think, all the way at the beginning of the first book, the very first chapter, or maybe it was a prologue, when Kern uploaded herself into that machine, we wondered whether he would explore the nature of consciousness, like the machine uploaded consciousness, and where that would take it. And he did. He's taken it several different places, like how what she did in the second, what she did in the second book with, what was his name, Meshna, when she took on started to simulate, when she sort of took over his feelings, and like he just did a lot, and the build up with that, I think, has been effective. But I guess it's worked better for it, but I'm not sure that it's strictly necessary. It could go either way.
I think the name recognition probably helps, just to be part of a series that's just popular. So you kind of get in the door in a lot of people's bookshelves that may not give it a chance otherwise. And you would I think you need a little bit of the series, a little bit of the background to not ruin the twist at the end. Otherwise, it might be hard to become invested in if it's just a standalone. So I guess the other question is, what does it add to the series long term? I'm imagining it's going to drastically change the way the direction the series goes next.
That is true.
It seems to have no limit to his to the evolution of all these species. There seems to be no limit now, because it can go in a direction that is unheard of, really. If depending on how he does it.
Is that a good or bad thing, though?
We'll see in book 4.
Yeah, we'll see.
Yeah, I definitely agree that, like, the presence of Portia and Fabian and a lot of those characters added nothing to this story. I mean, the fact that they were characters from book 1, it was irrelevant actually as it goes, but it did create this puzzle box effect in the book of, like, all things are possible. I mean, you're trying to work out what actually is going on. That's important, because if this had been a standalone, you would have definitely been looking at payoff for the scenes that it set up in it to make sense. Whereas in this case, it was just more about unraveling the ball of string, so to speak, to see exactly what it became. There's good physics reference. To see, so it probably doesn't work as well out by itself. I think it would have been a much longer book, and I think he's very keen to keep his books to be a certain length for readability factors.
Fair enough. I feel like China Mieville would have done a standalone book.
Yes,
and a longer one too.
Yeah. Well, it does make me wonder, Dan, that because he, he does have other standalone sci-fi books.
Yes.
So could he have played with this theme in another context and done the same thing? Or, it's a good question. Would it have had the same effect if he did that? That's a great question.
Because we're quite far away from the theme of the first book, I think, at this point. It's like, we're talking about different things now, I feel.
I think this book would have worked a lot better for me and been a lot more concise and tight if it just didn't include the previous characters. Like, just use the same universe, like use the same setup, but just forget about the other stuff and just focus on this separate group and what's happening here, and kind of just leave that stuff somewhere else for a while, because I was getting tired of the spiders. I don't care anymore. Let's move on. Like, it was really cool, but by the end of the second book, it's like, okay, I'm done with these spiders. Like, it's enough. So I think it would have been a little bit more enjoyable for me. I think it would have been less repetitive and tighter if it would have just been separate and same setup, but didn't need all the other stuff really. Didn't really add much, like Chris said.
It did make for a cooler reveal, though, of Miranda all over the place with Miranda's Portia, Miranda's Fabian, Miranda's whoever. So she's a simulator inside a simulator. That's so cool.
Well, I like that, but she ate herself. I mean, that bit was freaking brilliant.
Oh my god. That's true. And the dreams of Liv at the end of the world. Isn't it amazing how detailed the simulation supposedly was, in how little it used to simulate the end of the world, and this aspect, it wasn't really properly established, but I want to believe that they are right about the fact that the simulation wanted them to succeed
somehow
and kept retrying stuff. Oh, sorry, 1 second.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll be back.
It's Kern.
Yeah, I'm wondering about the simulation, because it seemed like it was saying, okay, well, the simulation takes the starting point, and all the inputs were coming out, from the sphere of the, from the outside of the sphere of the planet, and it's saying, this is the starting point, what's going to happen from now on. And they said, like, it's simulating things at a molecular level. But at that point, isn't it deterministic what's going to happen, sort of? Or is it implying that the choices that people make are the thing that's not deterministic? So it's running different simulations with the choices that all the different people make to see if one of them would have given an outcome of the colony surviving. Is that what it's saying?
I definitely think that's one of the questions it sort of poses, because it sort of ends in the same way, not just at the same time, but it sort of has the same outcome by the end of all of the simulations before they kind of start again and go ahead. You know, it is bleak, each of the runs of that simulation, and even with the outside.
What could have made the simulation different?
Yeah, well, was the simulation failing because it basically because the shuttle crashed on a planet? So that's kind of an ending of all these people, all these creatures. Was a simulation just doing that and actually ending their colony because it had no other reference other than that crash on the planet? And then with the introduction of Miranda, the Nod creature, to the simulation, then it was able to adapt and try to change what was going on.
I thought that it was sort of like it ran the simulation enough times until it finally found a solution in which they actually managed to land the craft on the ground, and then it was failing because there was no way they could have. I guess people haven't figured out a way yet to make it a self-sustainable world, because every time it was like it's self-sustained for a while, but then there's not enough resources or organic material or whatever, and they all die off. But I thought that it was like trying to find a solution in which they find, like, they set up things at the beginning. I think Holt also thinks about it. He thinks there's a section in which he thinks, oh, like this might be the apex. We're setting things up, hoping that they're going to continue on their own and they're going to stabilize and get better, but he doesn't know. So I think it's like the simulation was trying to find that solution, I think, through the people. That's how I interpreted it.
Which is interesting, because again, the idea of the people left in the spaceship was teased throughout it. Why did they leave them there? And it never really just incorporated them into the simulation then, because it never infused them, or it never had those people in or something. They were never awake.
Well, they did bring some of them down, though.
But essentially, the spaceship crashed. But they were wondering about, God, why is everybody kind of stuck up in there? But they never made it to the simulation,
but they did send the shuttle back up in the simulation. They send it back up to get a couple of people every time, right? But not that many, like only a few. Yeah. And at that point, they had enough children. At some point, they were like, "Oh, we can't get anyone else," which is also kind of an interesting topic. Yeah. But
it ran into the complication of, well, we have children now, so we can't support taking more
Yeah.
from up above, and then of course that was also the simulation was also making the shuttle maybe malfunction so that they couldn't bring more people down. I don't know. I don't know how much the simulation played into the trying to basically justify all of its all of the happenings that where the simulation was running through in order to keep the same initial people that it may have encountered briefly on its way in.
Yeah, I did think it was an interesting, like, philosophical thought about, who has more right. Like, do they have a right to have children at the expense of the people up there, which we're
Right.
hoping to actually have a life, but they don't? But, do those people have a right to deny him having children? It is kind of a bit like, again, very current. It's like, do people have the right to have children and use more of the environment and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? It is kind of thing that a lot of people do think about, right?
Sure.
It's just that idea that
Hard to say.
procreation, etc., is the very essence of life, and actually, without it, what is your existence if you're not kind of doing that part of it? If you're just kind of replacing them with new people from the ship, you're gonna die out
But
eventually.
it's kind of the same question they ask at the end, because they're like, okay, because when they say they need to save Liv, right? They also say, okay, who else do they save? Like, do they save every single generation of people from all the different iterations? Like, there's going to be millions of people. Like, who has most right to live in other people? And then also, if you extend that reasoning, is the simulation is going to continue running, and it's going to go through so many different permutations, do all these different permutation of people just because they have a possibility of existence have the same right to exist? It's kind of similar argument, isn't it? Like,
yeah, it is. That's true, and it's I mean, it's like your interferer, Miranda, the one who interfered with this whole simulation, that entity chose Lif because of how it interacted with Lif down there. But you're right. Why isn't the other simulations also get this privilege, or do they consider Lif to be just the representative of the simulation, and that's it?
I think they said, they would just get one and they'd let her sort of decide how to guide getting other people. But I mean, why does she get to decide? I guess I don't know. But also, it's like the question is, like, the thing is also, if they said that people in the simulation are real, like, as far as their understanding of consciousness and all those things, but then wouldn't you judge the life they lived within the simulation like enough? That's like the life, you know what I mean? Like, that's a life lived, just as real as all the other lives that
right.
have been lived, as if you follow, continue the logical path of what we were discussing before.
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, is Lif the one chosen because she's the only one who tried to break out of the simulation of striking down the other? She's the only one who stood up for the other, the outsider, and so maybe that's why they're giving her the option of choosing future representatives from the pseudo colony. Yeah, good questions.
I don't know. I guess if you had the chance of making life, creating life, would you feel like it's your responsibility to continue creating life in all the possible combinations you can? But like, or you just create two people and just say, well, this is what I have, and this is, I'm just gonna keep this and see what goes.
Well, that's that goes right back to Kern too. She wanted to create life. She wanted to play God, and I guess if you look at it from a strictly scientific, cold viewpoint, like she does, you would say, well, what do I have for resources? How much can I create? To what point do I get to the point where creation of more actually creates more problems than actually, and it starts eating itself, and so it's all interesting questions. Yep.
Do you give Frankenstein a bride?
Exactly.
Indeed.
I think slightly connected was also, which we did touch, was Miranda's situation in which they extracted her from that part because the part that she had left on the ship argued that we should get it back because by now she has different experiences. It's kind of like, oh, it's a different person because she's lived different experiences. And then I thought, because again, that's always how I think. I think like, okay, this is different, but where's the dividing? Where's the divide? Like, how much different experience does it take to be a different person, right? If I make a clone of myself and I wait 10 seconds, is that enough of a different experience that it's a different person, or how long do I need to wait? There must be some, some boundary in which you're saying, oh, it's a new person. But I don't know what that would be, but it's interesting to think about.
Wow. Yeah.
Oh boy.
Who knows? I don't know. Maybe all these things are just things you cannot quantify.
Yeah. Well, I know Vasha needs a clone, so the clone can go work while she stays here with us.
Yes, I'd like that very much.
But then doesn't the clone have the right to discuss books too?
Yeah, why does the clone have to do all the work? How's
Yeah,
that fair?
exactly.
Welcome to Severance. That's the premise of the TV show Severance, and it's
Ooh.
Yeah. I think there's a couple, like, yeah, right.
Severance.
Michael Fletcher has a story kind of similar in that, a short story. I forget the name of it. But yeah, it's kind of in that vein too, of clones and what do they have to do all the work.
But then if we had unlimited clones to do it, then we'd nothing left to speculate about and we'd have no podcast. So honestly, that's a terrifying future. Imagine if we didn't meet every Friday and we could just set our clones to do the work.
How dare you?
I know. This is
How
dark.
could you, Chris?
And would you know it was a clone, or would you not know if it's a clone of the real person? And who is the real person?
I was going to say, how do you actually know we exist and we aren't just kind of AI bots? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there's probably no answer to any of these questions. It's just, humans struggling to deal with what we think is sentience, but just some random, group of neurons thinking in different ways just because it casually happened that way. But it's, it's not structured because there's no solution. So you're just not able to deal with it.
Does Vasha's clone have free will? That's the question.
Would Varsha let her clone have free will? That's the really interesting question.
Yeah.
Definitely not.
Have permission.
She can do. I would like to have like a cloud of memory between the clone and me. Then we can both have our cake and eat it too. She can eat all the books. I can do all the work, and we can swap in and out. Like, never mind. I won't spoil other stuff.
I thought you were talking about other people.
You mean like Mark Zuckerberg? No.
Yeah.
Okay.
So good trilogy.
Yeah.
But not really a trilogy, so to speak. Not one that has like a very defined kind of goal at the end of it. It is more. It ends in a thought experiment, or certainly does to this point.
Yeah, it's not cohesive, but it's got a lot of interesting parts. If you take it as a whole.
Could you read this book as the first book?
I definitely think you could. I think you would probably want to read it again if you went 3-1-2 or 3-2-1. you'd want to go back and read this again. I think that would be the question, to kind of see what else you missed, and then you can be pissed off.
I feel you're not missing much. But...
Yeah.
No.
Well, I think you would be a little confused on the current front. That's the only one I would be worried about. The rest of it, yeah. But the only one I would be concerned about would be Kern.
Cool.
I mean, that's their issue as well, Jared. The only one they're concerned about is Kern. He's a loose cannon.
Yeah.
But I feel like you would still get like the point of a book.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah,
For sure.
Could you just skip the second book?
Probably.
No.
Read 1
Paul,
and 3.
why do you want to skip the book about Paul and the cephalopods?
Who gives a shit about Paul? To be honest.
I love Paul. He's.
I don't
I
think
do.
the octopuses add anything to this trilogy, to be
Nothing
honest.
at all.
I loved the octopuses.
Okay,
They built a nice old statue of Senkovi, and they were so. They communicate with color. Sorry,
here's
Chris, you were saying.
a controversial opinion, if ever there was one.
Mm-hmm.
I definitely think the second book is the weakest of the 3 books, but I think the section where the mind control of the nod to everything else, the horror section, is possibly the highlight of the entire trilogy.
I agree.
Yes.
Those 20 pages were really good. Maybe not even that much. It was maybe like 10 or 15 pages. But they were, I think, one of the most memorable, probably the most memorable section.
Yeah. Had a different feel than a lot of other parts. Maybe it had a similar feel to the beginning of the first book, like with the spiders at the beginning. Maybe. When it was more alien, I guess.
Yeah.
I like Dan's reading of it. I mean, that was cool, but fuck Paul.
I like the idea and the characters, and I just don't need them, really. Because I don't think they bring any interesting thought to my mind or thought experiment, or they're just there. I don't know. And by the end of the first book, the spiders also were kind of unnecessary, to be honest.
What?
I really wish they would have just had the standalones and just left the spiders and all the stuff in the first book. Started over again with this different vessel, told the story, told another story in the third book, completely separate, and then maybe in the fourth or fifth book bring them all together somehow. But
yeah,
I don't think it really added a whole lot. I think they would have been a lot stronger than separate.
Well, would have been really nice.
Maybe you can put them together at the end of the books. Just make them, join everyone else at the end of the book. But
if they had a split the consciousness of Kern at the very start, that she was in every, her consciousness was uploaded to every single ship that went out from Earth, and then we find out at the end of the third book that actually all of those consciousnesses can speak to each other. That would have been a really nice way to enable that to happen, and then also create this point where you can kind of bring it all together. But you wouldn't have had the puzzle box of this book in its own right. But I think it could have worked quite satisfactorily.
You could have had it. I don't know. Just structure it a bit differently, I think.
Yeah.
I wonder how much of that is like less creative and more like what a publisher would want him to do, because you would want there to be callbacks to the previous book to reward readers who were continuing with the series. I wonder how much of that is just needing to have that just to make you feel like you didn't just read a standalone and you're reading another standalone. There's a connective tissue. There's a narrative that runs through all 3 books. Because I think it would have been a lot stronger just being separate. But
maybe the publisher had something to do. Maybe he just likes to have those connections.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
I do like to think of the Split movie, when you don't know it's part of the same movie as Unbreakable until the end, and it's like way better because of it. I don't know.
Is it though?
I think so. Well, it makes it a lot more fun, I think.
Yeah. I don't think Unbreakable's that great, but yes, it probably is helped by the fact that it does tie in. And makes you think, okay.
No, I meant Split. Split is good.
Oh, sorry, Split.
It's called Split, right? The second one.
Yeah, it is Split. The
no, it's the third one.
Yeah.
Right.
The third one.
I don't know about the third one.
Oh.
I've never seen it, but
is it
The
Glass?
first
That second one's Glass, right? Or
second one's Glass. Yeah, second one's Glass. So Unbreakable.
oh, maybe
first.
Glass. I don't know.
I think that's right.
Yes.
Wait, are you talking Night Shyamalan's movies?
Yeah.
Yeah.
First is Unbreakable. The second one is what is the second one, Ben?
Glass, right? I think it's Glass.
And then Split. Yeah, that's right.
Okay, I see.
Isn't it?
These are all connected.
Or is it the other way around?
Yeah, I thought Split was second one.
You might be right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh.
Yeah, like they're connected in the third one, kind of, and end of the second one.
That's true. Yeah, Glass is the third one because I actually never watch. Is it Split? That's the name of it.
Yeah,
No, you're right.
I didn't watch that when it first came out, and I watched Glass first, and then I watched Split. And
yeah, you're right.
They still all made sense.
Yeah, Unbreakable is 2000, Split is 2016, and Glass is 2019.
Okay.
COVID scrambled.
I've only seen Unbreakable.
Yeah, but I think it's something I really enjoy. A lot of people did enjoy the fact that you didn't know it was part of the same series because it didn't need to be part of the same series until the end, and then there's like kind of like not cameo, but it ties in at the end, but it doesn't need to as a standalone. It stands alone, I guess.
Prometheus to the Alien series is a good example of that as well. You could watch Prometheus not knowing it was an alien movie, and then at the very end go, "Oh yes."
I think I did watch Prometheus, and I've never watched Alien.
Yeah.
Oh no! Really?
Oh man!
Damn.
It was on a flight, and I was bored. So.
I still think it can be a very enjoyable.
But I already know the story of Alien. That's the problem. I know what happens.
It's still worth watching.
Is it?
You'll die.
Yeah, especially the first film is brilliant.
Oh, there's a podcast in itself. Although Steve's already done those ones, but yeah, the Alien.
I'm already typing the event. What do you mean? What are you?
One's one of the greatest films of all time, and the other one's a pretty good action movie. There you go. Went really off piste.
What?
Okay. I think I need to jump now.
Okay. Thanks, Dan. See
Thanks,
you
Dan.
next
Thanks
week
for our discussion.
for Windup Girl. Yep.
See you then.
Yes. Let me see if I can figure out how to close this without breaking everything. How do I?
You're in a simulation. It doesn't matter.
I understand how to do it.
Does he exist now that he's gone? He's off the.
Well, there were a couple of for
the
those that are
recording.
listening on audio. He turned sideways and all. I think that was pretty much confirmation that Dan is not a real person.
Not a real
Yes.
person confirmed.
He turned 2D there for a moment.
Yeah, it was a bit.
Yes.
What do you call that character? Max Headroom.
Max Headroom. Yeah.
Yeah.
Max
Or she's too
Headroom.
young.
Okay. Well, more like oblivious. I don't. Slightly more that I don't know anything around me than that I'm too young.
What a
Anyway.
segue into our short story.
Early
Oh.
90s.
Interesting.
Max Headroom.
Yeah,
I think
late
it was
80s, early
older.
90s?
Late
I think it was
80s, I would
80s,
say.
yeah.
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 Yeah. No, a good segue into our short story, Grandpa, because Varsha didn't finish it, so again she's going to be oblivious to
That's true.
what we're going to
That
discuss.
is true. My apologies. I stayed up all night on Wednesday, and then I did not have time on Thursday to read it because I had to sleep. That's my excuse.
Well, I'm going to help because obviously we don't really do what the story's about. We sort of jump in. But I've went on to Goodreads to read the synopsis about what Grandpa's
Nice.
about. So, Cord is a 15-year-old boy who is part of a colonization team on a new planet. He often gets in trouble for neglecting assigned flora and fauna survey tasks. I mean, that sounds boring anyway. In favor of dangerous, independent experiments and explorations. In fact, the team leader wants to send him back to his home world. Luckily, the planetary regent is coming to accompany them on a tour while riding on a local life form, Grandpa. This is Cord's big chance to impress the people who control his destiny, but can he be both responsible and safe at the same time? He's about to find out because a big test is heading his way.
Varsha never found out, but I got as far as the rest of it. Oh, I like that synopsis. Is he
What
only
everybody think?
15?
Yeah,
I
he's
didn't.
only
Yeah,
15.
I didn't remember that.
He's an inexperienced young boy. It is a bit of a YA tale, I have to say. I sort of got very big Legend of Blackjack vibes from it in ways through it. It was okay.
Yeah, I didn't really. I knew he was a young guy. I didn't realize he was that young. Did it actually say 15 in there? Somewhere?
I think it did. I think it's.
They're usually all about the first line, Jared. So this is a. Yes, it does say line 4, a 15-year-old human being. There you go.
Oh wow, I'm losing my my mojo.
First sentence. Yeah.
Oh yeah. How about that?
Yeah.
I was more focusing on the green bugs and the bug riders and
yellowheads
and the
that kind of stuff. Yeah. And the sharks. Right, here's my reading of Grandpa, right? It's 17 pages long, and it tells this short story, young adult adventure thing. It's like, if you were going to write a short story, would you write it about, like, it doesn't seem big enough. I was sort of like halfway through it going, I mean, I don't really care. I don't really care about Cord. I mean, if he had been plucky or we had seen that side of him, it's very, like, I just don't get it as a premise for a short story to kind of write this, like, YA adventure thing.
I was kind of hoping they would all die. But I guess that's pretty predictable. But yeah, I just didn't care. I mean, it was fine. I was trying to get kind of the message of the story and go back to the beginning when he kills the writer, and everything was connected, and I kind of thought, well, maybe he's being taught a lesson about life, and now he's the writer and he's relevant to Grandpa and or the other things going on, and I don't know. I didn't really get what's the point. I don't know. I was hoping I just missed it.
I don't know. Yeah, it was. I thought it was an okay story. It was a neat little. It was published in what, Adventure Stories or something like that.
Yeah.
In the 1955 Astounding Science Fiction, and I mean, I thought it was a fun ride, and that's basically all it was. It was just kid getting a ride on a big raft creature.
Big Grandpa.
And his, so his boss is there, and that's for some reason the 15-year-old thing didn't click with me, because I'm like, he's basically getting a review for his job,
Appraisal,
the whole time he's there, and they're like looking down at him saying, okay, you better ship up or shape up or ship out, and so I thought he was a little older for some reason. I just totally missed that, because I thought he had a job like an adult, and and yeah, and so I was looking at, I was like, okay, so this has to deal with parasites, and it has to deal with one life form feeding off another life form, and the relationship between the two. And so the humans were using these creatures as transportation and they were using them, and they were using like their little heat guns there to as a means of directing them and move them. And Grandpa was the biggest of its kind, I guess. And and then as they're going along, they see other creatures using other creatures as parasites, and he's wondering about what the yellow frog-like creatures were, and so basically humans are trying, and the humans have only been here for 4 years or whatever, and they're trying to use the resources of this world as well. And the humans are kind of a parasite on this world for the time being.
Mhm.
And so that's kind of what I got out of it. And I was like, are his bosses representative of parasites in the way he sees them on this world, because they're there strictly to take advantage of the area, of the system, of the they're just parasites at their jobs. They're just using up resources, sucking everything dry, whereas he's looking at his job as more of exploratory and wants to think out of the box and wants to do something special. And in an ironic twist, of course, they just become food for Grandpa, and then so that's kind of the play on the story that I got out of it.
You got a lot more out of it than me. Because
Yeah.
I thought it was very, because I did get the fact that he was quite young, so for me it was very much that kind of this immature kid. Do kids have a place in society kind of story, and then within this adventure story, he's the person that comes and saves the day. The adults are there to tell him some of the steps to take along. So look after your crewmates and make sure they're alive. Give them a couple of shots to keep them alive. There is that little bit in it where he kind of basically says, "Look, if you put us all to sleep and they'll all basically die in their sleep, would that be a good outcome?" And sort of thinking about that, maybe the vitality of young life kind of is the bit that kind of pushed him through that difficult period. But that was about all that I got out of that side. But maybe that was because I didn't really care whether he lived or died. I was more concerned about Grandpa. Like, I've got to be honest, the creature that was there, that was kind of, I was much more concerned about its well-being.
He was an interesting creature.
Yeah,
No doubt about it.
I like the play on it because when you read the title, you think, "Oh, it's about someone's grandpa," and it turns out that it's this giant creature they use as a raft. So I thought that was pretty neat. It's not what I was expecting. So
Yeah, I definitely had the vision in my head of the Florida Everglades, and those big boats they have with the big fan in the back that moves around. I kind of picture Grandpa as some weird version of that.
like a big dinosaur, like a Flintstones type of thing.
Yeah.
So, not definitely not one of the more memorable stories in this collection, I don't think, but entertaining enough. It definitely seems to fit. When you tell me where it came from, Jared, like, it definitely seems to fit that kind of readership, if that makes sense.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely.
Yeah, it was fine. I mean, all right.
Yeah, I could definitely see the editor of that magazine getting this and being like, "Oh yeah, that'll fit in. That'll slot in nicely right here."
Yeah. And definitely a reminder that we are definitely getting into the pulp sci-fi age. Where it was those kind of short stories. We've kind of went from this very classical, kind of looking at what they thought the future was going to be in the 20s, 30s, then through the lens of war, and now we're in the kind of fantastical kind of adventure part of sci-fi, which will be challenged.
It's the kind of sci-fi that's taking the setting for granted. Like, it's not the idea anymore. The setting is not the idea anymore. It's just taking a setting for granted and giving you this sci-fi adventure-y tale that, action and adventure type thing.
Cool.
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 Yeah.
Sorry, I got distracted. Are we okay to? Because I guess you guys are all done talking about the story. I am sorry I couldn't participate. I will catch up on the story though, and I know
You're fine.
you
No,
don't
no, you
think I need to.
Oh no,
Okay, fair enough.
you have to finish, Sasha.
Okay,
Yeah.
wait,
You're gonna
that's different
look
from
back.
the.
When we finish the whole book, you're gonna look back and say, "I just need to read that second half of Grandpa because it's the 7 pages I did not read in this whole book."
Yeah.
You don't have to go back and say, "I read every single page."
And it leads
Yes.
perfectly into the game of Rat and Dragon by Windup Smith.
Yes.
But more creatures.
More creatures. Yes. Yeah, I really love that story, but it was in the context of the rest of the stories in that book. Like
If
Chris
I
mentioned
remember
before.
rightly, it was your it was your pick of the stories from that
It
entire
was.
book, wasn't it? Yeah. So.
Yes, it was. I loved how insane and bizarre it is. But yeah, so that's this short story we'll be talking about. Is it Game of Rat and Dragon or Cat and Dragon?
It's Rat and Dragon, but it is about cats.
Yeah. Of course it is. Speaking of sentient creatures.
Flurkins specifically, I would say, is a bit of a spoiler, but
Yeah. So, Game of Rats and Dragons by Smith. Also, check out his collection if you're interested. Like, if you are reading along with us and you like that short story, you may want to check out the collection. What was it?
Rediscovery of Man.
Instrumentality of Mankind. No?
Rediscovery
of Man.
Rediscovery of Man. Who's not in it today? Anyway. And we will be starting Windup Girl by Paolo Bacigalupi next week, if I'm not pronouncing that correctly. Please correct me, but it will be too late to correct my pronunciation because these go up several weeks after we finish recording. But I will remember for when we do other books by the author. So
I think that sounds good.
And that's pretty much it. We'll see everyone next week. Thank you so much for listening. Bye.